a rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but that beautiful.
Okay. Welcome to the Wilson Hour Show. I'm your host, Michael Phelps from the Wilson Hour Show, from the Wilson Hour Group. As I always state, that Wilson Hour Group is a educational group. We try to talk about problems as well as talk about solutions. Today is a special event. We're talking about two great leaders, and these leaders are impacted our lives. And first and foremost, as I say, my name is Michael Phelps from the Wilson Hour Show. I'll let the other king introduce himself.
Raymond Carlisle.
Okay.
We'll start off with today's topic. Today's topic is, what were the key philosophical and fundamental differences between Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X? it lies in their different approach to achieving racial equality. So now to start with King's approach, his strategy was to use the nonviolent civil disobedience approach. That was to use the nonviolent civil disobedience approach.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll start with that, then we'll move on to
Okay.
Malcolm X's approach.
Okay. He said King was it was a civil disobedience approach, right?
Right.
So
Nonviolence.
and when we think about nonviolence, we think about turn the other cheek, resisting to fight with the same measures. Can't fight fire with fire. Technically, really, and that was kind of like what the approach was like.
Hate can't drive out hate.
Hate can't divide hate.
Hate can't drive out hate.
Yes.
Only love can do that.
Only love can do that. And what else you got with that?
I mean, when I think about that, we'll get more into it. But as we're just talking about a nonviolent approach, I can definitely see the benefits. I can see the benefits of a nonviolent approach as well as the setbacks of a nonviolent approach. You know, as far as the benefits of nonviolent approach, you know, there's no saying, you know, you get more
draw more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
Than you do with vinegar. And I mean that's you know that saying is applicable. Because the thing is that oftentimes it's a fine balancing act when you're trying to achieve a goal, but how you achieve that goal matters. Your why is important, why you want to achieve that goal. But you have to look at your how is so very important because remember, as you point fingers at others about how they do things, then you have to take a step back and take a look at yourself about how you do things.
Yes.
And I think that I believe that was Martin Luther King's position.
Yes.
I think that was his operational position. That is, let us not look like them.
Yes.
Let us not do what they do. Let us not operate the way that they operate. But then, like I said, and I understood it. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
Yes.
But then I also understand.
But we're gonna get into the ugly part about it. Let's talk about the good part about it.
We'll talk. So like I said, I agree with that. I agree that it's important that you don't point fingers because you know the old saying go, you got to point one finger at something, you got four more pointing back at you.
Yes.
You know, so you can't point a finger without having other fingers pointing right back at you. So you know you have to measure yourself. If you're gonna set a standard, then you have to operate by that standard that you set.
Yes.
And you can't call somebody ugly and then you turn around and act ugly.
Yes.
Because then they could turn around and say the same thing about you while you call them telling how ugly they act, and they can turn around and say how ugly you acting.
And nothing gets accomplished.
And nothing gets accomplished because it's just two ugly people acting a fool, and nothing. And like you said, nothing gets accomplished. Nothing's getting done.
Yeah.
And the goal is at an impasse, so to speak.
And you have to take basically what you're saying, they have to take a civil approach, civil, not a barbaric approach.
Yes.
To handling a barbaric situation.
Right.
What Martin Luther King wanted to accomplish was that we're facing tyranny in the face, and we can't fight tyranny with tyranny. That was his
philosophical approach.
That's his philosophical approach.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and with that approach, there's a lot of things that could be accomplished in hindsight 2020. You know, it did get things accomplished. In the process of getting that, you have to line people up to think and believe that. So it took a lot of work to get people to believe in that concept. Especially when you getting dogs sick on you, water hoses turned all the way up to burn your skin off. You watching women and children get beat.
Yeah.
elderly getting beat.
Yep.
So it takes a lot to try to convince these people to not swing back.
Right.
You know, even when I seen some of the marches, I did see people swinging back and they get hit with clubs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever seen that.
Mm-hmm.
And I seen people trying to hit dogs and stuff back because dogs was biting them, and or they run over to try to protect their children.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a lot to resist that. So you got to give him that credit for even getting people to remain nonviolent, even when they had to do peaceful protests. You know, that takes a lot of work because there's always one who's going to be a disruptor.
Oh yeah, I mean it's much hard. It's much harder to be passive than it is to be aggressive.
Yes.
Much harder. I mean, you know, when you fight fire with fire, you know, but it's emotional. You know, you're being attacked. You feel some kind of way about being attacked, so you want to lash out. And the reality is that when you lash out, you come back out with violence. You actually feel better on it. You actually feel good on the inside because you feel like you're actually doing something about what's being done to you. But so that in of itself is a feeling.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're making the situation better. And the reason why, here's an example of what I mean, Barney said, doesn't necessarily mean that you're making the situation better. Is because when you look in our communities today, that very same mentality. Okay, when you think about striking back, okay, that what's happening is that lives are being lost.
Yeah.
They're not being gained, they're being lost. Okay, so you have to, you know, that's and when like you said, we'll get into that more here in a little bit, but it's just, you know, that's just something to think about. So there is something to be said about a nonviolent approach. There is something to be said about being able to see, you know, living to fight another day.
Yes.
There's something to be said about that. Because that, you know, that nonviolent approach opens more doors than it closes by being nonviolent.
Yes.
So
what was this? That was the Malcolm X. Martin Luther King approach. And let's just read about the Malcolm X approach.
Okay. So now it says for our brother Malcolm X's approach was to promote the idea of by any means necessary, which could include violence if needed, highlighting a stark contrast between their differences and beliefs on how to achieve success in the civil rights movement. So what I like, there's two words here that stand out to me. By any means necessary, the word necessary stands out to me. And then when I look at which could include violence if needed stands out to me. Necessary and if needed.
Yes.
So it wasn't necessarily that
he wanted like
that that's what he actually wanted to do and that's what he was pushing, but it was more of a, if you got to protect yourself. Yes. If you've got to if you've got to take a stance as a man providing for his family. You know, no man's gonna want to stand by and watch his wife being punched in the face. No man's gonna want to stand by, watch his children have dogs sicked on them. No man's gonna want to stand by and watch his kids or his family or his grandmother, his mother being beat in the middle of the street. No man's gonna want to stand by and see that. Yes. So of course, as a man who was a protector of his family, he's gonna want to do something about that. Yes. He's gonna want to because that to him that's a violation. That's a no-fly zone.
Yes. That's a threat to it's a threat to the democracy of his own family.
Yeah, it's a direct strike to his dignity as a man, his self-respect as a man, because as a man
he's supposed to provide,
see yourself as a provider and a protector.
Yes.
So when you look at that, there is something to be said.
But the key point is that I want people to understand that he did not promote.
No.
He did not promote violence.
No.
He said only.
Exactly, and that's what I was about to get to.
Okay.
I was about to swing back around to that, and I said, but so the key point is that if necessary and when needed.
Yes.
If necessary and when needed. The violence you take it by force when needed.
Yes.
If necessary.
Yes.
So it wasn't that he was initiating a fight, saying, "Hey, let's go fight."
Mm-hmm.
It was, no, if the fight's brought to you, then take a stand, take a hard stand.
Yes. Yeah.
And let it be known that I believe that his approach was, let it be known that you have just as many rights as they do.
Yes. Yes.
That just like they have a right to protect their family, you have a right to protect your family.
Exactly.
Just like they have a right not to be beat on, because of course during that time of civil rights movement, of course their women were going to be respected, their men were going to be respected. So if their men could be respected, if their women could be respected, in his mind, why couldn't we be respected?
Yes.
So that was all of that. I believe that was his position, that was his stance.
Yes.
That was, that's where he meant when he said, by any means necessary. I think that's what he was emphasizing.
And if it's necessary.
If it's necessary, take a stand.
Take a stand. And because we don't want to get twisted, we don't want to make him look like a demon that he's just promoting fights.
No.
And ready to go to war. No, he was ready to sit at the negotiation table, but he also wanted to let them know, if y'all bring harm upon us, we're gonna bring harm back on y'all. He said, we're here to have peaceful talks. So let us stay there. Mm-hmm. That was his stance. Mm-hmm. But if you're willing to go beyond that and try to inflict harm on my women, my children, my elders, and on us, we will protect ourselves, just like how you have the right to protect yourself, like you said.
Yeah.
It was his stand. I want people to understand that that's what he stood for.
Yeah, he stood for, I believe, in which we'll get to what they both stood for, what they had in common.
Okay, I got a comment.
Okay.
Brother Alan McFall, what's up, my brother? Good to hear. Good to see you, man. He said, to me, Martin appealed to the better angels of whites to do the right thing, while I see Malcolm as promoting strength through numbers, unity, and forthrightness by black towards others. Yes, and that's true. They both had. I believe both of them had strong points of views that was beneficial for the cause for that time. I think that the extremes had to meet. I think the extremes were needed on both. I think the approach that Martin took, there is a civil way. There's times where you have to do commerce, where you have to do diplomatic ways of reaching a goal. Then I believe in, because if we look at the history of America was violent. It was built upon violence. So sometimes violence has to be got by violence, but that's the last resort. Even when we go to war with other states or either country, peace treaties are supposed to be talked out first. They're supposed to be the first initial thing before war even implemented. So I do believe that, I believe each extremes was important, and it just depends on each individual. Every individual think differently. Some people think that, oh no, they've been beating up on us for a long time, we just need to go out and war. Why go to war when you ain't even prepared for it?
Right.
For one thing, Malcolm knew that we wasn't prepared for war. Mm-hmm. He knew that we wasn't even together, and he wasn't togetherness. Mm-hmm. So how can you promote war when y'all not even together?
Where there's a lack of unity.
Lack of unity.
There's a lack of unity. You can't even
and lack of communication.
You can't put a good basketball team together without a lack of unity. You get one ball hog on the court, and no one else, and you don't pass the ball to anybody else, and then you utilize the rest of your team.
There's a lot of people like that.
There's a lot of people like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because it was about them. And so, when you think of, I would say that Martin Luther King's approach was more of an approach where it would cause the opposition to listen, to hear, because everybody knows that. And you think about this, all your listeners, the way someone approaches you will more than 90% of the time determine how you respond. Someone approaches you in a disrespectful manner, you're more than likely going to respond in a disrespectful. You're going to take a defensive stance, and be ready to throw down if you have to.
Yes.
And I believe that Martin Luther King understood that enough to know that if we take an aggressive stance, an aggressive position, a violent position, that it would only cause the opposition to take the same position, the defensive position, and that at that point negotiations could not take place because no one would be listening, because they'd be in defense mode. You know, when you go into defense mode, of course, your hearing goes. You know, it's like, you know, you got two people yelling at each other, neither one of them are listening to each other. You got both parties trying to get their point across, yelling across. I mean, we've seen this in many times, again, in communities, whether it be between brothers, whether it be between sisters. You know, where there's name calling and different things going on. No one hears an apology anywhere in there. No one hears. It said, let calm heads prevail. There's no calm heads. So nothing's prevailing, because if you're both in a heated position, nothing good is coming out of that.
Sure isn't.
So that's what I see. But like I said, I definitely see that there is a place from what Malcolm was talking about, and from his position. I see that there's a place. And like I said, we'll get into that. Let's go to the next. Since our beloved brother King focused on achieving change through love, integration, and be persuasion. Yeah. Okay. I have to explain that one because I'm not familiar with that one. Through love, integration, be persuasion. So oftentimes when I hear this subject brought up, especially among brothers and sisters, for those who are more towards on Malcolm's side, one of the biggest issues that they have with Martin Luther King was the fact that they said that he wanted to integrate. That's the biggest issue. It's like, why would you want to integrate? Okay, why do we need to have our own stuff? Yeah. That is something that Malcolm X talked about. Having your own stuff, having your own businesses, having your own stars, and there's something to be said about division. Yeah. Okay. There's something to be said about you stay on your side, we stay on our side. Why? Because that was already going on. That mindset was already active when you talk about how the communities were divided. Yeah. The communities between the North and the South and the East and the West. Even in the very community that we live in right now, you got South Omaha, which is more of a Hispanic community. You got North Omaha, which is more of a Black community. You got West Omaha, which is more, which is more, European. And then you got East Omaha, is like what they call, like, I don't want to, disrespect anybody, but
the trailers and lower class.
Let's just put it that way. And it shouldn't have to be that way. Yeah. Because a unified front is always better than a divided one. Yeah. You take kingdoms by being unified, not by being divided. So I believe that there was something to be said about, Martin Luther King's desire for integration. Not that it was the perfect plan. No one's saying it was the perfect plan, because you can't integrate with somebody. And I'm just going to throw this in there because it's applicable. The scripture says, how can two walk together unless they agree? So, and I throw that in there because I believe it's applicable right here. when you're talking about integration. And I think that's part of it. That's part of the problem. That's part of the issue that that Malcolm X had.
Yeah.
With Martin Luther King's position.
Yeah.
Was that, okay, you want integration, but they're not integrating.
Yeah.
You want integration, but they're killing our children. You want integration, but they're killing off our black men. You want integration, but they're raping our women and beating them in the middle of the streets, this, that, and the other. You want integration, you know.
They don't give no economic balance.
Right.
They're keeping all the power.
Right. They keeping all the keeping all the positions of power. So, but I'll turn it over to you.
When you look at integration, it wasn't that. I think that at a particular time in a particular space after the civil rights movement, after the Selma movement went due, and when they won the desegregation bill, and it was passed, Martin Luther King, everybody was partying, everybody was in the up where everybody was happy. They was throwing salami and whatever they was doing. Just partying and was cheering the thing. And Martin Luther King was in his room in a deep depression. And then he said to himself, he said to Ella Delafonte when he came in, the actor, came in there and he said, man, what's up, man? We won. He said, man, I feel like I integrated my people into a burning building. Because he knew that integrating, after he fought and did all these things, he realized that they had did some things in there. They slid some stuff in there, which integrating what is going to be beneficial for us in the long run, that we was going to forget about ourselves. I think that's why he felt that way. Mm-hmm. He started to see, like everybody have an epiphany after something happens. Mm-hmm. So I think he had an epiphany. So when he seen that, that he felt like he led his people into a burning building, he felt like, man, we ain't gonna have our own stores. We ain't gonna do it because we're gonna want to integrate. We want to be like them. We want to live like them. We want to do it, and we forgot about us. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why he took that stand, and that's the reason why he started migrating over to Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. But remember, both of them had to go through a transformation because Malcolm X had to go through one himself when he went to Mecca. So now the two extremes started to see there's a bigger picture.
But what the beautiful thing is, and I think this is a good transition. I want to go back a little bit to what you're talking about when he had the epiphany, and he felt that he had led his people into a burning building, and he realized that some things have been snuck through while they were in agreement, while they were sleeping, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because they felt that they had attained a victory, not realizing that, oh, wait a minute, you forgot about yourself. But and the thing that came to mind about that is that why did there have to be a self? And what I mean by that is because that was part of what made things the way they were at that time, because there was a self.
Yeah.
Okay. The opposing side thought about self-preservation. Okay. And so at the same time,
well, they thought in unity. They thought about keeping themselves in power.
That's my point.
Yeah.
They thought about self.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was one of the people that said that.
Yeah. But then you take that same mindset, right? And you try to, it's almost like fighting violence with violence again. It's like, wait a minute. Since they think about themselves, we need to think about ourselves.
Yeah. Okay.
So not that self wasn't important, because, and there's a part of self that even today is difficult. I often, when I speak to our young people, I talk about how, at one time we were shackled in our hands and shackled in our feet, but today the worst shackle that there is the shackle of the mind. And so when I talk about that, it's because you can see the shackles on it. One can see shackles on their hands and one can see shackles on their feet, but no one can see the shackles on the mind. But you can tell when one speaks if their mind is shackled, because it comes out in their words, it comes out in their actions, it comes out in how they problem solve, or the process information, or the lack thereof. It comes out. It can't help but come out. So when you think about that, then you're taking a step back and says, okay, I'm going to think about myself. And in the communities that we live in, we have just that. We have neighborhoods within our communities where people think about themselves. They don't think about the whole community as a whole. They think about themselves. They think about what their own families or whatever the case may be. They don't think about the next door neighbor. They don't think about the people down the street. They don't think about how their behavior affects the entire community. They don't care about that.
So basically, you're saying that what Martin Luther King and Malcolm X fought for is in vain.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm saying because it's still present even yet today. The mentality that one would think has gone away. The very thing that Martin Luther King fought for went in vain to an extent. The very thing that Malcolm X fought for is more present, actually more prevalent to an extent, because what we have is within our communities, we have a lot of violence. But the violence isn't divided. We have more violence among ourselves than we have with others, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because of the mentality. Okay, the mentality is because the thing is that again, where you were trying to bring about, and they were both trying to bring about unity, right? They're both trying to get a people to function together, but you had one that was trying to emphasize the importance of all people working together, and then you had one that was and I'm not going to sit here and I hope I'm not coming across as if, because Malcolm X had a good position. It wasn't that because it was violence if necessary. And there was a reason I believe that there was a reason he pushed more of a let's think about ourselves. I don't think his dream was to think about ourselves to be divided. It was more think about ourselves so that we could be united.
Yes.
That we could understand and that we could see that we actually have value within ourselves. That the picture that had been painted, the picture that had been the Picasso that had been painted and taught to us was not what was. It wasn't reality. But the worst part of it is that many believed that there was a reality. So therefore, he talked about how it started to manifest itself. Where we started to hate, we started to self-hate. We started to hate the way we look. We started to hate our lips and the size of our noses. We started to hate. We started to hate the way our hair looked. Yes, start hate. And so when he was pointing all those things out, it's not that there was anything wrong with somebody wanting to go and do something different with their hair
to be like someone else.
But what he was addressing is that the issue it was a lack of love. It was a lack of self-love that it reflected that he was trying to address. He was trying to get to the root of the thing, and the root of the thing was the lack of self-love.
Yeah. Brother Alan Nafal said, I think it's easier to break down the approach of integration as flawed when speaking through a racial lens, black versus white. But I think there is an argument that the black community isn't quite as integrated amongst themselves now as the black community was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Our own lack of unity seems as much as a threat as immigration with white America. You're right. You're right. And that's
what we're saying.
And that's what we just talked. I'm glad you broke that down, brother.
Yeah.
When we lack like we were speaking of, lack the love of thyself, is what caused us to be integrated amongst ourselves. I seen people live next door to people, and when we grew up. When we was growing up, now this is 70s and 80s, and in the 70s and 80s, that's when I can remember. The 90s is when it started to change a little bit. Starting to see the changes, but it started in the late 80s. But in the 70s and the 80s, while we was growing up, the unity in the community was deep.
A lot deeper than
and like I always say, when there was no families that didn't go without food because families around the community made sure everybody ate. So if they had gardens, they had stuff they had over their house. They will, you can go next door and borrow milk, sugar, and all that. You can, if your kids were starving, they say, "Oh, we got some corn over here. We got some tomatoes. We got some tamales. You can go make you some. We get you some flour or some." People, the community looked out for each other. everybody knew each other. They knew each other's kids by name, not by, hey, who are you? You know what I mean? They knew each other by names. Oh, that's the Phelps. That's the Starks. Oh, that's the Lucases. That's the, Valentine. This is the Levin. Everybody knew names. It wasn't nobody didn't know your last name, and they know who branch of family you came from. And if they had a problem with you, your parents will grab you, take you to or auntie or uncle or the mother or the father or the grandparent.
Or a phone call will beat you there.
Or, yes. And you got a phone call, we had to rotary dial. That bad boy, they still was able to get to that call before you made it home. As long as it took you to run that thing, that message still got home before you got there.
Right.
And you're on a bike going 55 miles per hour.
Right. All they had to do was
So, but that was the community. And community members trusted each other. You couldn't do nothing down the street and get away with it without a neighbor giving you a spanking and then dragging you back home where you got the second spanking. So it was a unified effort. It was a village. That was community. Now, when we broke it up in community, I think the reason why the community is broken is because the lack of love and self-love. And babies raising babies.
Well, even back then, truth be told, even back then, babies were raising babies. Back then, our parents were having kids at 13, 14, 15 years old.
Yes.
So it was babies raising babies then. I think the only difference was that.
But they was marrying back then. Well,
it was arranged marriages, but
until
it's like, hey, you got a pregnant, you got to get married. It was one of those things. But when I look back, when I think about it, I think it was more because the civil rights was fresh. The civil rights movement was fresh in the minds of generations at that time. So our parents were one generation removed.
Yeah.
From those riots, from those things it was fresh in their mind. Their parents were part of those things.
Yes.
So then they knew, they saw what their parents went through, right?
Yeah.
So because they saw what their parents went through, and they passed down things down to us, things that we saw. So the way our parents were interacting with each other was based off of how their parents interacted, because it was fresh off of the civil rights movement.
Yes, yeah.
And the further and further we separated, the more space and time that came about, that the further and further we got away from that civil rights movement, the more that information, the more the imperativeness or the importance of that information being passed down, the mindset changed. It got more and more watered down as each generation entered.
Yes, and we got to remember, we got to add into the civil rights movement. The reason why it didn't affect us like it should have in its full totality is because it was being watered down and diluted. And diluted by other entities that was added into that.
Absolutely.
True. you had the feminist movement. You had the LBG. Them movement was in there. You had a lot. You had the Chinese movement. You had so many different movements in there. So what was happening there, where we was trying to we was trying to lead the first stance on helping us. We ended up finding ourselves, everybody else was being helped too. So it kind of depleted what we was trying to accomplish within ourselves. And then it got to the point where we fought for the civil aspect of this, but we never fought for the humane aspect of it. Because once you learn the humane, because if you go back and watch the Native Americans when they wouldn't follow the Trails of Tears, they ended up fighting for the humanity. So when the Native Americans went and fought when Standing Bull and them went, they lost a lot of people in the Trail of Tears trying to get to fight for their humanity rights. Once they got the humanity rights, they was able to go back and sue the United States government for cruelty on humanity. We went civil. So civil means the civil obedience, disobedience, obedience of civil. That means that you're talking about laws, and you talking about whatever rights you want to throw in there. Like, you know, you have animal rights, you have, you know, all these different things.
Right.
And so, but if you fight for humanity, now you're talking about just a particular group of humanity who feel like they've been discriminated against. So then it separates you from all the rest of the other entities. And I think that's why civil ended up going in the way that it went. And then right after the civil rights movement during our parents' ages time, then here comes the disco age. And during the disco age, what was being pushed down? Narcotics. So you got young people raising young people, narcotics and disco. So, you know what I mean? So now you got the disco, narcotics, civil that just passed, integrating at the same time. Women trying to fight for their rights now. Then you got a certain sexual preferences fighting for theirs. Then you got Chinese is over here, Mexicans over here. Everybody's in here fighting in this pot. So guess what happens? Something's gonna get left out. Somebody's gonna get left out, or someone's gonna have to be stepped on. So it was a whole lot of, you know, there's a whole lot that went on, and I just think that's probably what hurt us too. And I'm not saying that's the whole thing, but I think that hurt us a lot too.
Well, I would say that, I mean, of course, you know, when you think about when you think about a football team, everybody, in order for a team to function properly, everybody got to play their part. Everybody got to play their position. But those positions, each position is focused towards a goal, and that is to win. Okay. So, but in our communities, though we have spoken so much about, somebody said it was weeks ago. I mean, we've been doing the show for a minute. You know, and there's been people who say, "Well, man, we've been talking about this forever, but nothing has changed."
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when are we going to see different? We were talking about this last year. We were talking about the year before that. We were talking about 10 years ago. You know, there's people who've said that, and there's some truth to that.
Yes.
And there's truth to it because part of what and I'm gonna say this, I believe, of course, it's my opinion, that the people lost sight of the vision. Okay. In other words, you know, if you're fighting for this goal, okay, then your mission, when people have a mission statement. A mission statement is a commitment to what someone's going to do every day to achieve the overall goal.
Yes. Okay.
The goal is something that's going to occur in the future. And the mission is what someone's going to do every day to achieve that goal, which is to be achieved in the future. So,
and you go back to the mission,
right?
If you get off course,
when you get off course, you go back to the mission. You go back, you know, where you look at the goal. You say, well, here's the goal.
And this is what I said.
And then you make adjustments to the mission statement. The mission if possible, if necessary.
Yes. So
there it is. Now you got Malcolm X's statement: by any means necessary.
Yes.
Okay, meaning that when you have a goal in mind, you make the necessary adjustments if necessary in continuance of the goal.
Yes.
Okay. So as a community, what has happened is that though we have spent several years talking about the goal, right? But here's the problem. The problem is not the goal. The problem is the fact that people, not only have people lost sight of the goal, okay, but it's their missions. It's the mission. They're off mission.
So so what you're saying is the field is plentiful, but the laborers are few.
Yes.
Yes.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
So it's
many are called, but only a few are chosen.
Because you got people, you got this goal, right? But you got people on the team, quote unquote, that don't want to play their position.
Yes.
They're trying to play other positions that are not their own.
Alan McFarland again, my brother said, he said, I'm 53. I'm a 53 elder in the family. Aren't what she said. I'm 53. Elders in the family aren't what they used to be. My nana was the nucleus for all the McFall household. I would argue the passing of the grandparents of Gen X was very crippling to the Black community at large. Yes, because when my grandma passed away, that hurt
Well,
It hurt our family, you know.
But now, and that's true.
And
There's
we
truth
did
to
have a
that.
grandpa still.
Yeah, there's truth to that.
But he wasn't the one that kept everybody together.
Exactly. That's what I was getting at right there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, they passed, but
nobody picked up the torch.
It's not that they passed. It's what passed with them.
Yes.
That we're talking about. Okay.
Because others should have picked up the torch.
Others could have picked up that torch and continued.
Yes.
The traditions or whatever it is that kept everybody together.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The phone calls, calling people saying we getting together, we doing this.
Right. It was a matter of, but see, the thing is that now you look at this. Now, what did grandma or great grandma do that grandma or mom couldn't do? Okay. And now you have to look at the why. Okay. What did grandma have that passed? What did she have that other people in the family didn't have? She had respect.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the people respected her. So when the way that the great grandmas of the past were able to keep people together was through that respect.
Yeah.
They knew they had differences among each other, knew that they didn't want to come and be in the presence of each other.
Mm-hmm.
But they said, well, you know what, grandma, I'll do it for you.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'll do it for you. All right. Now, as time went on, there was no more, I'll do it for you.
And you know another thing if two people in the family had an argument, grandma would call you and say, y'all need to cut that crap out.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all need to get together and talk. Y'all need to get out of there and get it. You got people today say, oh, well, let them figure it out. Let it go. They let it fester for 5 to 10, 20 years and won't intervene.
Right.
You know, and that's where I've seen a lot of the problems come in at too.
Yeah.
You know, someone, like you said, someone should pick up the torch. You might not have all of grandma's faculties on how she handled things, but I'm pretty sure you got something. You might have a negotiation tool where you can bring people together and negotiate.
This is the thing. It's just like the grandmas of the past, what they call the big mamas.
Yeah, okay. The nucleus. Yeah.
They cooked. How they bring everybody together? They cooked.
Food. Yeah.
They brought people over food, right?
Mm-hmm.
But guess what those big mamas were doing? Big mamas were teaching their daughters how to cook.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. But what I'm saying and what I mean, I'm just using cooking as a metaphor, you know, or as an analogy. But what I'm talking about here is that no one took the time to learn how to cook, so to speak.
Yes.
Before grandma passed.
Mm-hmm.
So when grandma passed, just like what was the name of that? There was a movie years ago. When grandma passed away. Matter of fact,
Big Mama. Soul Food.
There was Soul Food. Then there was also Almost Christmas.
Almost Christmas.
That one.
Mm-hmm.
When the wife passed away, they spent all their time trying to find her recipes. Remember when they finally found her recipes? Because they were just the husband was trying to figure out how to make that pie. Yeah. And he couldn't quite get it. He kept going there trying to put it together, and it kept coming out nasty. And then when they finally found the recipes and found out how she did it, then the food came out right, and everybody did their part. And so what I'm saying, and that's what I'm saying when I said, people, when you have a people who don't value learning, our young people today, unfortunately, so many of them do not value learning. But then their parents are the same way. They didn't value learning. So therefore their children's children don't value learning, and then the children's children won't value learning as well. So what I'm saying is there as we're talking about Martin Luther King, as we're talking about Malcolm X,
this is what they try to implement.
This is what they were trying to implement.
Yes.
This is what they were trying to.
This was the positive side about it.
It was much bigger than a civil movement. It was a civil rights movement. It was bigger than that.
Bigger than that.
It was a people who would have respect for themselves. It was people who would value themselves. Like people who would teach themselves and learn and make learning. That's what Malcolm X emphasized. He said, read. He said when he spent his time in prison, he said he devoured as many books as he possibly can because he believed in having an educated mind. Yeah. So
without going to college.
So he took what he got, what he learned, and then he tried to teach his own people and say, look.
And remember you were talking about good pride?
Yeah.
He took pride in reading.
And learning.
That's the good pride.
And that's the good pride. And that's what he was trying to pass down. He was like, learn. He said, don't let people convince you. Because what was he talking about? When he kept talking about people convincing you, he was talking about things being whitewashed and all those things. When Malcolm X was addressing those things, what he was really addressing, even back then, was the shackle that people had up on their minds, because people had gotten to a point where they allowed people to tell them that they were stupid. They allowed people to tell them that they're incapable of learning. They allowed people to tell them that your hair is nappy, that you got big lips and you got ugly eyeballs and big lips and big noses. But see, the thing is,
and you know what we grew up on? Remember how we grew up and talk about each other?
Yeah.
We used to always say, you got the African with the big bones, them big bones on your lips.
Talking about lips and talking about noses.
And we was killing ourselves.
We were putting each other down.
Yeah.
So we passed that. We passed that sickness down through time. We called it crowing on each other.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, so while we sit around laughing and joking, we didn't realize
we hurting people.
We were hurting each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are affected by that to this day.
To this day.
Yeah. And we know that. We know that. We know that hands on.
Yep.
You know. But that was the benefit of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, what they given us. They was trying to pass down education.
Yes. And
self-worth.
Unity. Yes.
And unity. Because we're in a psychological right now, you can look and see that we're still psychologically in change and emotionally and mentally in change. Until we break away from those chains, break free. You got the key. You just don't want to put it in the lock and unlock the chains. The chains from being held down. You just don't want to you don't want to be held down. You know, I was watching this animal country. This guy had a big old giant elephant. This elephant was huge. Man, he had this little bitty rope tied to a chair. The chair was like this. It wasn't even mounted to the ground or nothing. He had it tied to I lie to you not. I'm gonna send you the video. He had a little bitty thin rope.
Yep.
Tied to a chair that wasn't even tied down. The elephant looked and seen the rope and it's tied to this thing. It would not move. That elephant would throw that thing all the way around.
Now, so here's a question. Why did the elephant not move?
The mental change.
Because the elephant had been convinced that anything it's tied to was a barrier to hold it in place. Yeah. And it's just like there was one I used to listen to motivational speakers, and they talk very much about mentality. And it said when a lion sees an elephant, it thinks lunch. And when an elephant sees a lion, it thinks fear.
Yeah.
And so again, even though the elephant
is way
bigger and stronger than a lion, okay, but it's the mentality that the lion has versus what the elephant has. Even when they talk about elephants being scared of mice or whatever the case may be, again, you're talking about mentality.
Yeah.
Okay, for whatever reason, and so when you apply that to a community, you apply that to community people who have to make it a point to change their mentality. They have to be deliberate. See, Malcolm X talks about his time spent in prison. He deliberately changed his mentality by educating himself. He deliberately wanted to be different. And matter of fact, that's when he joined the
Nation of Islam.
The Nation of Islam.
Yeah.
It's when he was in prison.
In prison, yeah.
And I believe the very thing that attracted him was a unity. It was the self-respect.
Yeah. Pride. He put pride
in being black.
Yeah.
But what I like more is that once Malcolm X went to Mecca, when he talked about his trip to Mecca, he said, what I saw was that people, basically he said, I saw people of all nations, of all colors, sitting down and eating together. What do you call that? Integration.
Yeah, and
Okay,
and he seen they were civil.
And he said he saw that they were capable of doing it and that they were civil. So you can see that he wasn't. Malcolm X wasn't a hateful man. He wasn't. He wasn't after just being hateful or teaching blacks to hate whites or vice versa. That's not what he was after. What he was after was self-respect, self-value,
Self-dignity amongst yourself.
And, there was nothing wrong with a people having respect for themselves, no matter where they were from.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
he was saying that they had a right.
Every nationality that come over here respects their culture. They respect themselves first. They ain't gonna let you come over there and intervene in the Asian culture and then take from them. They got their pride within their culture. They got their pride in how they live, how they eat, and all that. That's them. That's their stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think we forgot that. But let me read Alan McFall again. He said, I would argue in the 50s, 60s, etc. The journey is where growth happens while striving for a destination. But today there is no community value in the journey. And the only thing that matters is the destination. It almost forces one to take an individual approach to their success because the community lost this sense of value of the totality of life. Yes, they have.
They took it. Yeah, I mean, just like he put it so well. They lost sight of the vision.
Yes,
they took their eyes off the vision. It's like you're not working towards a common point.
Yeah,
you're all over the place.
And a community stands for working together for the common goal and the common interest of the collective.
Right.
When you forget about the collective and you forget about the common goal, you forget about the community. There's no community. That means you're hoods. Because hoods means that everybody's for himself. It's a game of cutthroat. Everybody has to get what they want to get. It's all about I, me, and mine. That's hood mentality. Community is we, us, and ours. That's where we keep forgetting. And that's why we got to flip the language, flip it upside down and change it completely. Take I and strike it out. Take me, strike it out. Take mine and strike it out. No, but just remember, I, me, and mine has to incorporate into the we. Because I have to do what I got to do in my part. And I have to unite with you. So now we become a we. Right? So, and then when I look out for my family, I'm looking out for your family. So now it's about we.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's about us.
Right.
So then when we start looking at the broader picture, we say, man, this is a whole community. We both gonna live in it, and your kids gonna live in it. Your mom and your dad and your uncles. Now it's ours, because now it's our community. Right. So that's how we got to look at this thing. And that's what Malcolm and Martin Luther King was trying to express. That's what they that was their goal. But like I said, they took different approaches.
Right. But they had the same goal in mind.
They had the same goal in mind. They really was the same.
Yeah.
Only fundamental difference is the approach on how they was going to approach the situation.
And I don't think
the approach is really that different. I don't even think the
approach is really that different. I mean, Malcolm X did say by any means necessary.
But he said if.
But there was an if. And like I said, you got to look at the operative word there, necessary.
Yes.
Okay. If it was necessary. If it wasn't necessary, there was no need to take that approach. And so I believe that in that regard, their goals were the same. In other words, to teach a people, to teach a nation to have respect for itself. To teach a people, to teach a nation to value itself, to have a sense, to operate with a sense of dignity and a sense of self-respect and a sense of unity. Because they had been convinced that they were not capable of functioning as a unit. That they were incapable of any value. That they were not even human. Okay.
Now, when you said it, you made me really think about when we talk about splits and we talk about desegregation instead of integration. We was desegregated by ideology and concepts because people didn't want to listen to Malcolm, and Malcolm Cruz didn't want to listen to Martin. We was desegregated right then and there because we didn't want to integrate because one extreme thought the other extreme was too extreme, or one extreme was laying down, taking, and I couldn't stomach to see my women and children and dogs. So they was throwing insults at each other, right? Because the extremes was different, right? But then when they realized the women, and this was the funny part, the two women got together and talked to the two men. Yeah. Then they started to see the bigger picture. But it was the women that brought that to the fruition. But that's why it's important to understand the balance between man and woman. Yes. Oh yeah, 100%. And we have to understand that, and that's why we need that. For both. Yes. There's no one being more important. There's a need for both. Yes. Because it creates balance. And they bring something to the table that sometimes men with pride and puffed up and ego. Yeah. A woman brings a soft-spoken word, a soft tone, and a soft understanding, where a man has to sit back and reflect and dissect the information and say, "Dang, you know what? Maybe I do need to reach out to that brother over there because all our people are suffering because we're dividing them. We need to come together." But see, by that time it got too late because guess what? Once they got wind of that, they started annihilate them. So now we lost two great leaders because they was too busy fighting at the front. That's what they wanted to do. And once they realized they was going to come together, oh no, we better stop this movement. So they had to, because remember Martin Luther King, he changed his whole, for the last 2 years, he started changing this whole conversation. He started talking about by any means, we're going to do the poor man march. We about to go in and ask for our check. He got kind of aggressive. He started getting aggressive in his last 2 years. That poor man march speech, he was on it, but he said, "We brought y'all over here. I mean, y'all came over here and took our land." Because basically Malcolm X said, "We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us." So he basically saying, "Y'all came over here and took us from over here, and then took us over there, and then brought us back over here and stripped us from our identity and did all this." Martin Luther King started saying the same exact thing. He said on that poor man, or you go to get a chance, look up the poor man march speech. He started talking about the same thing. He said, "Y'all came over here, y'all took our lands from us, had us teach y'all how to farm our lands, and y'all, and he said, y'all came over here and gave the white settlers land by the dozens. I mean, and we, had us teach y'all how to farm our lands." And he said, "We coming back and collecting our check." Now he got kind of rough with him. He got aggressive. They didn't like that speech. That's when they had him killed. That was the speech that got him. That's what they said. That was the speech that got him murdered. He started getting rough with him at the end of the last 2 weeks because when he's a man, because you got to think about it as a man. I'm just, we all got to think about that. Remember, you got to remember during the Martin Luther King march, that bombing in that church when they killed them 4 innocent girls. What man can sit back and stomach that? Right. What man can sit back and watch those videos, watch on TV with dogs are biting little kids, little girls, and men? I mean, grandparents, older people that couldn't even barely walk. They were standing there doing protesters, nonviolent, ain't doing it, and you sick and dog, you sick and whole. A man cannot do that. Even in the scriptures in the Old Testament, Israel had to go out and kill all the things that was destroying. They're trying to rape their women and all that stuff. God said, "Go and kill them. Take nothing." A man could not do that. No man can sit back. I couldn't even watch a man walk in my house and and rape my wife and rape my daughter. And I'm sitting here saying, "I'm going to take a nonviolent approach." Right. You just couldn't do it. After a while, if something's going to trigger, you're going to say, "Man, I have to do a change. I got to protect by any means necessary." Well, that's where that necessary comes in. That's what that come in at. That's why I wanted to go there, because you have to start to feel something. this is your goal. You want the nonviolent.
Well, the reality is that it's really a fine balancing act.
Yes.
And so, but see, the thing is that many people in today's world, they take that necessary to a fault.
Yes.
Meaning that no, they had other options. They chose not to utilize those options.
Mm-hmm.
They chose to take the aggressive approach first, and then said, "I didn't have a choice."
Yes.
No, you had a choice. Pride, bad pride, would not allow you to take the other choice that was available to you. So in other words, so you would quickly say, "Well, I had no choice." And look, this was happening, but you didn't. But to take a step back and look at the other choice that you made that led up to that place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you would see, oh, wait a minute, if I'd have made a different choice here, then maybe that could have prevented this. Maybe if I made a different choice there, that could have prevented this or that or whatever the case may be. But now that you're here, you say, well, I don't have a choice. Well, you had a choice back here,
Mm-hmm.
but you chose to do whatever you chose to do here,
Mm-hmm.
which brought you to here.
Yeah.
So, again, that's where, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is that's where, when I talk about the fine balancing act, that's where accountability is important.
Yes.
Where one must take accountability, where one must have a sense of integrity,
Mm-hmm.
hold himself accountable for that which is right. There's a right and there's a wrong.
Yeah.
And you don't do wrong and then turn around and call it right.
Yeah.
You understand?
Mm-hmm. And I don't really think, not to cut you off, but I don't really think some people don't think that one's action, you have to always think about, even any general, he always got to think before he go to war. He always got to think about casualty of war.
Yes.
Your goal in life is to prevent as many casualties.
Yes.
Sometimes people act so much on emotions,
right,
that they forget about the casualties.
Right.
And even if I'm Tyrone and I kill Pookie,
mm-hmm.
there's casualties there, because guess what? My family's going to side with me. Mm-hmm. Your family's going to side with you.
Right.
And then there's going to be other feuds going to go on beyond that, beyond those
right.
us shooting and killing
right.
at each other.
Right.
So that means that caused casualties amongst other people who have nothing to do with that. Our two men that couldn't agree on something, and one took a stand, said, "I have the right to take his life because I had a disagreement with him."
And then what happens later on is that generations later, there's divisions, and they don't even know why.
They don't know why.
You ask them,
and that's where our communities are messed up right now.
Yep. Because something happened way back here that they weren't even a part of. That got passed down, got watered down,
mm-hmm.
and they don't even know how it started.
Yes, and that's why Malcolm was telling them, we don't want to go to war because that's not our goal. But by any means necessary, we will. But he also wanted to make sure that he had a united front,
mm-hmm.
and everybody was on the same accord when we get ready to go there. But he said, because this is not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy task.
An uphill battle.
And that's why Martin Luther King did the same thing. And man, this nonviolent approach is not going to be easy. Mm-hmm. He had to constantly talk people into it. He had to constantly talk. He used the churches. He used all the Baptist churches, AME churches. He used all the Christian church. He used so many different walks. And then he used Jews. He used everybody. He used a lot Native American. He was in tune, even though he was the people's pick. He was their pick. But you got to understand, even he was picked by them, the FBI still didn't like him. Mm-hmm. They did not like it. They thought he was still consulting with the communists. Mm-hmm. And he was doing nothing but nonviolent. Where do you get the communists at in this? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? No, they just didn't like him because he was uniting people. That's what they didn't like. Right. Same thing they didn't like about Malcolm X, because he was uniting black. They didn't like Martin Luther King because he was uniting people. Mm-hmm.
Because they didn't want them to get along, because it went against their agenda at the time.
Yes.
And so when like I said, when people have an agenda, they have a plan, and they're like, wait a minute, you're interfering with my plan. Yes. What you want to do and what we want done are two different things. Yes. Because what we want there to stay, we want division to continue to be in place. Here you go talking about integration. No, we can't have that. We got to stop that. Then the more and more you get a person to get people on board, where you're going nonviolent, right? So you're working around people's defenses. you're working around people's emotions by taking a nonviolent approach. It forces people to have to see themselves, to look at themselves, and they're looking glass selves, to look in the mirror and say, "Oh, wait a minute, maybe there's something to be said about this." People start changing their mind. People take notice. Oh, wait a minute. People start changing their mind. Whoa. It's starting to get more and more people to say, "Oh, we got to put a stop to this."
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's that integration that you're talking about. That's when that had to. No, we got to stop this because they're starting to integrate people. Mm-hmm. They're going against our agenda. They're going against what we want to see. They're going against what we want because we want the power to remain with us, not with the people. We want it to remain with a select few.
Yes.
And see that. So were you up against racism? Racism was only used as a tool.
Yes, and it's
still. Were you up against discrimination?
It's a tool.
Discrimination was only the tool to feed the agenda. If that makes sense.
Yeah, feed the mission statement.
Feed. You see the overall goal. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so again, when you talk about when someone discriminates or when someone discriminates against somebody, they're doing them an injustice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When someone is racist to somebody, then they're saying that their race is better than your race. Okay.
Yeah.
We're better than you. You're less than us.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, people can say that all day and I'm gonna say, just like when I was in school, you come home like, I used to get in fights in school because somebody say something about my mom and she'd ask me. I remember I went home one day. She said, "Do they know me? Do they know me?" I'm like, "No." "But why are you worried?" And I had to think about that. I had to think about the fact that they didn't even know my mother to even be talking about my mother. Right?
Yeah.
So what am I saying? What I'm saying is when people engage in like racist type actions and racist type thoughts, this and the other, you'll never be able to change what's going on inside the black box of someone else's mind.
Yeah.
But what you will always be in control of is your response to what it is that they're putting down, to what it is that they're putting out.
Yes.
You don't have to respond in a negative way. And that's what Martin Luther King was talking about. You don't have to respond the way they're programming you to respond, because what you don't realize is that the very thing that you hope to achieve, a sense of dignity, a sense of dignity and a sense of respect and a sense of value, you're actually losing when you allow them to walk you into burning buildings.
Yes.
The burning buildings of emotion, the burning buildings of anger, the burning buildings of resentment, the burning buildings of hatred. When they walk you into those buildings and you start to engage in the activities that they've instructed you to engage in. So now we start to talk about the guns being dropped off in the neighborhoods, the drugs and things that are being introduced, the alcohol being introduced, all those things being introduced. Why? Those things were introduced because they were part of the goal. They were tools to be used, and the people fell victim to it. That makes sense.
Yeah. And that's one of the I'm kind of glad we had this conversation and this topic, because I know it was kind of like a difficult topic, because we're talking about different styles of leadership, and a lot of time people think just because you have different styles that you can't unite. This is really the most important part about this topic. Just because we have different ideologies, different concepts, or different beliefs on how we view things, or how we think things can go, that doesn't mean that we can't find some common ground to come together and achieve those objectives. Through maybe we might have to taper one down to raise one up, or maybe we have to tape one down and then raise the other one up, or maybe we can tape them both down and make them equal, or we can make one higher than the other, or whatever. It works. Sometimes it takes that. It's called checks and balance, but it's talked about a unified effort. No matter what we do, we have to unify in some way to have an effort, to make an effort, or to change the cause of what we consider our past to make a better history, a better future. And I just think that we can't get past our differences in our ideology approaches. We got to stop looking at each other as, "Oh, I don't like what he's saying. I don't like how he's doing it. I don't believe that." No, find some common ground or find some common interest. Because we ain't always going to see eye to eye. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody ever read. Go read when they was creating the Declaration of Independence for the United States Constitution. Go read how they fought, and they was ready to go to blows, and they was locked inside this room for days, trying to come up with the constitutions and all that. Man, them Adams and all them guys, Washington, they was about to go to blows, man.
But that's how collaboration is done.
But see, people don't understand that's how it happens. Mm-hmm. You're not going to agree. Mm-hmm. You had Jersey, you had New York, you had Philadelphia, you had all these Congress senators coming from all different walks of life, from their little towns or mm-hmm. states, mm-hmm. coming in trying to bring their ideology into the thing because they want to be. Some wants to just be heard, some ain't mm-hmm. being heard. Some, mm-hmm. Some feel like they're more important than the other one. It was a bunch of chaos.
The hardest part about collaboration, this is something that I had to learn because I remember when I was in college, the thing I hated most was
the teamwork. Had to do a team project.
The team project.
Yeah, I hated them. Yeah.
But it wasn't until years later I learned the value of team projects. Mm-hmm. Back then, I'm like, look, I just want to do my own assignment. I don't want to be worrying about nobody.
Ain't showing up. Ain't doing that. Arguing.
Right. I don't want to. I'm not trying to carry the weight for nobody who wants to be lazy. Any of that stuff. So I was just like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be a part of it. Right. But here it is, years later, and I understand. So wow, what I was missing out on if I'd just took the time to listen and learn about what collaboration truly was. Mm-hmm. Collaboration is is so very important that you sit at the table of understanding, the round table of understanding, and understand that we're all sharing ideas. But the most difficult part of sharing ideas is listening.
Yeah, or carrying someone who ain't showing up. Well, because remember, people didn't show up because that affects your grade.
Right.
Because they had to put their part in.
Right.
And if they're not showing up.
Right.
Then it falls on the team.
It falls on the team. And again, but even that in of itself was collaboration, because in any team, whether it be people will fall off the team for whatever reason. They could fall off the team because they're being lazy, fall off the team because they don't agree. They could fall off the team because they're sick and can no longer perform.
Hey, well, man, ask you a question. Why you saying that? When y'all was going through the team process of doing the assignment, when you went to complain, I want to see if you had the same. I want to see if you got the same feedback I got. Mm-hmm. When I went to complain about people ain't showing up and we can't get this done, what did your professor tell you?
Figure it out.
Figure it out. You better try to figure out, get them there, or go over there and try to help them with their assignment.
Whatever you need to do, figure it out.
Figure it out. They never
said, okay, I'm gonna put you in a different group.
Yep, never did. And they never said we're gonna take them out the group.
Nope, never.
They left that decision up to you, and you had to figure it out.
Had to figure it out.
You and your teammates who was coming up.
Figure it out.
That's what it was.
And that's the thing is that, and in life is that way. In anything you do in life, you got to figure it out. And it's like, but there's something to be said, and it's very true. 2 heads or multiple heads is better than one.
Yeah.
It's like there's something to be said about no man is an island. All ideas don't stop with you. Mm-hmm. They may begin with you. In other words, you can bring your idea to the table, but do understand other people are going to bring their ideas to the table as well. And the goal of communication, the goal of collaboration is, like I said, listening, meaning that you have to be willing to hear, because when you're willing to hear and ask questions, see, once you come to a conclusion, once you come to an answer, collaboration at that point or the thought process has stopped. But as long as there are questions being asked, then collaboration has continued, teamwork has continued, learning is continuing. Mm. Why? Because you continue to come up with new ideas as you continue to ask questions. When people present their points of view, what that should stimulate in you, if you're listening well enough, is to ask questions. Okay, well, did you consider this? Did you consider that? They'll do the same thing with you. You'll bring certain ideas, it'll stimulate something in them, and they say, "Ooh, wait a minute, that makes me think about this." And it's like me and Mike do it all the time. We do this all the time, do it every week, where we, we don't really talk about this during the week. We say, "Hey, this is what the subject matter is going to be." We come together, and there's times I know you've probably been the same way. Man, how in the heck we gonna do this? But the crazy thing is that it always works out, because by the time we get here and we start discussing it, and Michael brings what he brings to the table, and I bring what I bring to the table, what it does is it starts to stimulate more thoughts in him. It gives him more to add, and when he's saying it stimulates more in me, it starts giving me more to add. And before we know it, it's an hour and a half then passed. We had this conversation. That's how it works.
Yeah. And take it now. We don't always agree philosophically on everything.
No.
We have fundamental differences as well.
Yeah.
But the beauty of collaborating with your equal. Remember, Dr. Henry Clark said, "I debate my equal, the rest I teach."
Mm-hmm.
So, and I always say, when you debate your equal, the rest you're going to teach. So, in the process of us understanding each other, we teach each other. Because we are equal, we debate each other. There's things that he might think I don't agree with some of the things he believe in. Some of the he don't believe in. Some of he don't agree with some of the other things I don't believe in. But once we have a dialogue and we sit down and have a conversation, guess we end up have to go. Guess what have to happen? I'm not going to agree with you right now. I'm gonna have to go home and process. And when I get home and I start to process, I'm gonna tell you one thing that me and my cousin had a real fundamental differences with. I mean, you used to always say law. Everything's about law. Remember that? And I'd be like, maybe we got to use compassion. We got to use this and that. But as I started to move, after I started to migrate into treacherous areas where people, I understood what law can work for, and I can see where law can work against. So I always say, so when he said law, first I was like, now law, that's what got us in the place where we are. But then I started thinking, I said, man, no, law does work, because if law is like religion. Religion is a law, because it's a practice. You do it daily. You put it in your routine, and by law, you're gonna do what is supposed to be done for you to live a prosperous or stand-up life, what you want to call it. Now, in that law, I might say, I got to add some compassion in there. But I also got to remember that he said law. First, I was against the word law, because I was just trying to be rebellious. Because I thought law was just the worst thing in the world, because I always thought the law it can be utilized as a weapon and not utilized for the help of the people, because I think people will use laws to make themselves to stand above or to step on others, but that's not true. It depends on the morals of who holds the law, what morals do they have. So it does work. So when he said that, I had to think about it. Oh, my cousin's right. I said, we do need law. The picnics and stuff we did, well, we need law. And one time I had to expand on that law. It hurt me because I had to say it to a person I didn't want to say it to. But it was some law that needed to be set forth. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't have it there, then anybody can walk in and do whatever they wanted. Mm-hmm. So we have to have that there too. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, cousin's right. But it took me some time to get to that. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I just wanted to let you know I remember we had that big argument at one time, and I mean, I did say we got over it, but I just want to let you know I paid attention to that, and that's where that incident happened at the park that one time. Mm-hmm. Why that came about, because I understood why we needed it, because it had to. We got unlawless people.
There has to be order.
Yes.
And where
structure.
Where there's no structure, there's chaos.
Yes.
But like you said, though, even where there's structure, then you have to leave room for
compassion,
extenuating circumstances.
Yes.
Where compassion and empathy comes in.
Yes. Yes.
Because everything's not black and white.
Yes.
So then it's like, okay, well, what if this comes up? Now, what if the what if comes up? The what if is going to come up. Okay, it's not if, it's when.
Yes.
Okay.
Or where.
The what if is going to come up. So now here's the question. What are you going to do when the what if shows its head?
And guess what? And who, you know, because you got the who.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the one to pop up? And, you know, and then you got to say, is it going to be an elder? Is it going to be a youth? Is it going to be your own, you know?
Right. Sometimes it might even be your own mama.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to handle that? I mean, those are things. I mean, like I said, it all feeds into what we're talking about today, where we talk about, you know, so the statement we just talked about, you know, that integrates Malcolm X's position by any means necessary. Okay, where you have a standard, you have a standard order of doing things in an orderly fashion, but by whatever means necessary, meaning that when the necessary thing pops up, you make the necessary adjustments because it's necessary.
Yes.
But then you have the Martin Luther King application where he says, okay, this is family where we need to integrate, we need to figure this thing out, we need to work through things. No one's better than anybody. We need to, you know, love is important, integration is important. And we approach those things through persuasion, this, that, and the other, you know. So you see where both schools of thought are necessary.
Yes.
No one is better than the other. They're both necessary because in any given time, you know, with Malcolm X's position, you introduce Malcolm X's position where you have to make adjustments.
Yes.
Then you introduce Martin Luther King's adjustment. You introduce Martin Luther King's position where you introduce integration. Because when you're trying to keep the peace at any given time, there's going to be extenuating circumstances that are going to cause you to have to make a necessary adjustment.
Yeah.
And you can't be so stuck in your ways that you're unwilling to make the necessary adjustments when it calls for a necessary adjustment.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes. But you know, we had a good topic, good thing. We started late, due to certain things, but we're gonna end up closing this out. What is you know, what did we didn't read? I wanted to just read them off. I wanted to read. I just want to read some of those things. I want everybody to understand that.
Okay, I'll just read through them real quick. Let me see. Okay, so we never got to Malcolm X's. On the other hand, emphasized black self-determination and separate black community until white society was ready to treat them fairly, appealing to morality versus a social construct. We addressed these things, understanding these confrontations. King's philosophy relied on appealing to the moral conscience of the white Americans, urging them to see the injustice of segregation and racism. Malcolm X, in contrast, often used confrontational tactics to expose white hypocrisy by pressuring them to change through coercion. I believe their potential impacts on success and their failure success. Kingdom's nonviolent approach garnered widespread public support, particularly among white moderates, leading to significant legislation changes in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But we can see some changes did benefit us in some areas of life, but the string of racism is still much so present and operational as if as a well-greased oiled machine. I believe that civil rights was okay, but what if we fought for humanity instead of civil rights and fought to get rid of the 3/5 of the human clause? This to me was his failure. While Malcolm X, by any means necessary stance, may have energized some black activists, it did alienate potential allies, which led to accusations of extremism, potentially hindering broader movement progress. But in my honest opinion, I believe they both should be worked together in the first place. Should have worked together in the first place to achieve a higher outcomes, because both extremes were needed for much better results.
Yes. See, they both had extreme power, and they both had extreme compassion for what they believed in, and they both had a way of getting us to see beyond the condition that we was in. They wanted us to see. They wanted us to look within ourselves,
see the bigger picture.
and see the bigger picture. We can't keep looking through the peephole. We got to see the bigger picture. And when you look out the window of the big picture, you got to see what's actually out there. Because sometimes you can look out a big window, don't see nothing. So they were trying to make you see all of it.
Tunnel vision.
Exactly. So I just say that I'm glad this conversation came up because it really gave me some insight just today while we were sitting here talking.
Likewise.
But you want to, what's your final thought?
My final thought, like I said, as has been emphasized, both points of view, both approaches were necessary. There was good in both. So with that being said, I encourage that when you find yourself sitting down at a table of collaboration, be a good listener so you can understand the other person's position so that you actually have something worthwhile coming forth with that will continue to take that conversation forward.
Yes. And my final approach thoughts mean is we ain't always gonna agree, and we all don't have the same job. I think that's where the disbelief come in in our community. Everybody thinks that everybody should have the same job. No, the roles are different. If this person is an educator, let them educate. If this person is boots on the ground, let them have the boots on the ground. If this person works in politics, let them have the politics. If this person is the economic, let them have the economics. You cannot be in a position that you're not qualified for. And when I say qualified, that don't mean education. That means that those areas are not your expertise. That's not your title. That's not your position. That's not what you're passionate about. People you need to put people in position where they're passionate about. That's how the change come about. If they ain't passionate about that area, or they only there for looking for the dollar, you're going to get what we're getting. So make sure the people who's running for any position or ready to sit down at the round table of discussion, make sure they're passionate about what they're sitting down at. Now, and make sure you understand a wolf's dressed in sheep clothes when they're talking about they're passionate about it. Because some people just can be argumentative, not passionate. There's a difference between being argumentative and passionate. Remember, look for the sign, because I sat at tables with people who just argumentative, but they consider it passion. No, you're argumentative because what you want to do is stand on with your moral beliefs and your agenda. You're not passionate about the people. Listen to key words. Who are they talking about when they're talking? That's where we mess up at, and this is why we have so much division in our community. Please take the time to hear and not just listen. We as in ours, love, life, and loyalty.
Yeah.
A rich man's world. I have turned the soul of this beautiful land, but the